Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR 96.3 HD2 and Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight on the Daily Drum, we're talking about housing discrimination. The latest statistics show housing discrimination is on the rise. So, what's driving up the numbers? How do you know if you have been discriminated against? And where do you go for help here in the DMV? My guests are Candace Gray, Director of Education and Outreach for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, and Ronald Clarkson, Director of Communications and Outreach for Housing Counseling Services Incorporated. Thank you both for joining this important conversation.
Yes, glad to.
So
Thank you.
let me throw a couple of things out to you. 2022 was the highest number of complaints ever reported in a single year regarding fair housing. 33,007 fair housing complaints. And overall, complaints were 5.7% higher than that previous year. And often we know that complaints are based on sources of income and domestic violence. Those complaints increased considerably. But let me first ask, how do you define housing discrimination? Candace, your thoughts about a working definition?
Absolutely. So, on behalf of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, we reinforce Title 19 and Title 20 state laws. And the definition regarding housing discrimination is that it is illegal to discriminate based on race, color, religion, or creed, sex, age, ancestry or national origin, physical or mental disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, and also familial status and source of income. So it is illegal to discriminate in housing according to the protected classes that I just shared.
That's a really long list. And as we
Yes.
know, uh, individuals can fit into not just one of those categories, but they can fit into several of those categories. Ron, how does somebody know that they have been discriminated against, whether it's rental housing, whether they're trying to buy, or any of the kinds of activities around housing in between?
Well, first of all, I would suggest, and again, thank you for the opportunity.
Sure.
I would suggest that people first kind of do a gut check. If it doesn't feel right, then start digging a little further. If maybe you know of somebody else who has approached the same housing provider and has had a different experience, and you feel like your experience was somehow altered in some way because of your mere presence, or maybe the sound of your voice over the phone or something like that, then definitely start asking more questions and dig deeper. And a couple of other things, and it gets a little blurry in that, the protected classes can vary from one jurisdiction to another. The ones that were outlined previously by Candace affect Maryland. But in DC, we have even more protected classes. There's up to a total of 20 when you include the federal protected classes. And so it can be, as I said, very blurry depending on where you are geographically. And any complaints that are filed are going to be based on actually where you're physically located at the time of the incident. And
That's
so,
interesting. Go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, and I was going to say, so as far as federal goes, those would apply anywhere in the United States. And this is a shorter list in that it includes race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, and familial status. So it's just those 7 that apply across the country. And then
Mhm.
each state, county, what have you, can add on others, which some were highlighted, as Candace mentioned, for Maryland and some of the counties in Maryland. And as I said, there's an even longer list here for the District of Columbia.
What else is on the District of Columbia list?
All right. Well, you've got age, sexual orientation, gender identity, marital status, political affiliation, believe it or not, personal appearance, familial responsibilities, matriculation, source of income, place of residence or business, victim of an intrafamily offense, that being domestic violence, which you mentioned earlier, homelessness, and a sealed eviction record. And that's something that's more recent here in the District of Columbia.
Wow, that's interesting. And golly, personal appearance. I guess for some of us, I guess we wouldn't be able to move in, with these violations. Oh my goodness, if I look at my own imperfect face, but all jokes aside, I I think the thing that is really interesting. You mentioned, Ron, the gut check, and in this highly politically charged um, day that we live in, a lot of people will say, well, you claim that you were discriminated against because you're black. Well, you're just playing the race card, and there's nothing to it. That seems to be, for a lot of people, gut check notwithstanding, a slippery slope.
It can be, and that's where institutions such as that Candace represents come into play. And I'll let Candace talk about what they do in terms of digging into that.
Sure, go ahead, Candace.
Yes, I would like to build on that. Thank you so much, Ronald. So, our organization, we recently hosted a session in the community, and even in the community, we were discussing fair housing just on Tuesday evening, and some individuals expressed that when they shared their knowledge of fair housing and they dug and did their own research, they were able to then kind of change the trajectory of the conversation and their treatment within fair housing. So I want to add that it's important for individuals to ensure that they are doing their own research in any situation. If you are looking to rent, if you are looking to own, go online, connect with people to do your own research so that you know the laws around what you are doing. That may not pop in other people's minds sometimes, but it is good. Anything that you're involved in, do the research. If anyone is unsure if they've experienced discrimination, they can reach out to the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights and file a complaint. So when filing a complaint on our website, they will be connected with an intake officer and also an investigator so that it can be determined if this is discrimination. So we dive in with fact-finding conferences, and we ensure that we gain documentation and data so that we can connect with the client or individual who has filed a complaint to really give them details on what discrimination is, and if the situation that they experience is discrimination. So outside of just filing a complaint, we offer education and trainings to ensure that individuals know the laws around what this discrimination is and if it applies to them.
Well, Candace, since you mentioned it, first of all, share that website for us, please, because I will be posting that website along with Ron's organization as well. But please share the website for our listeners, please.
Absolutely. Our website is mccr.maryland.gov. Again, that is
One more time, please.
Yes, mccr.maryland.gov.
Maryland spelled out?
Correct. Yes, Maryland spelled out. And when individuals go to our website, on our website in red, there's an option that says file a complaint. Individuals can file anonymously or non-anonymously. They can also call our office at 410-767-8600, and we will have an intake officer to answer the phone.
Mm-hmm. And before we continue the conversation, Ron, you're the website for your housing counseling services.
Yes, our website address is housingetc, like etc.org.
Housing etc.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, housingetc.org.
So let me ask you this, Candace, because I think this is one of the things that a lot of people want to know. So if someone goes online and wants to file a complaint and say they don't want to be anonymous because they believe that they have been discriminated against. So what happens and how long might that take? Because on one side, certainly someone may want to have an issue addressed. But on the other hand, these things would come up. Why? Because they're looking for a place to live. And so how much
Mhm.
time are we talking about here to from the time that you file a complaint until the time that it is resolved, if indeed there is meat to the complaint accusation?
Yes, that's a great question. Thank you for that question. So, um, when individuals file a complaint on a state level, it could take some time. We do ensure that we provide updates. So if an individual files a complaint and they call, we will give them an update, whether that is, hey, we are at this level, or this is where we are, this is the status of your case, whether it is we are still waiting for details or waiting to connect with another party. But the time frame of a case being resolved it can be long. However, we are on a state level. We also provide resources for individuals to connect locally with their counties, because sometimes one could file a complaint with our office at a state level, but if their county does provide resources for them to have an option in limbo, for them to actually be able to find a place to live in housing. We do also encourage individuals to connect with their local human rights agencies in their county as well. Again, that doesn't negate away from them filing a complaint with our office. However, filing a complaint can take a while, as it requires so many details, so much documentation. We may, determine if there's a mediation involved or if we need to take this to litigation. So, for
Mm,
example, if an individual does file a complaint, they're no longer living in the dwelling where the complaint happened, it could be that they contact their local human rights agency for support and help, as they are looking for another place to live, while still being involved with a case with our state office.
that's an interesting thing to consider. Ron, with housing counseling services, and I only have about a minute before we go to a break, and we may have to finish the answer to that question on the other side. But with housing counseling services, during the counseling process, do you educate people about the laws or the circumstances under which they may feel that discrimination of any sort may be an issue?
We try to. It depends on why they're seeking counseling. And in some cases, it'll be a matter of them trying to quickly deal with maybe improving their credit or something like that.
Hmm.
And they're not really focused on discrimination. And so, but if they're in that process of seeking housing, we do remind them that they have rights under the Federal Fair Housing Act, as well as whatever the local laws are, and that those rights can protect them as they're going through their search process. And to speak directly to that one issue that you brought up of the timeliness and trying to find housing, we sometimes do have people tell us, "Well, I'm in a rush to get a home right now. Can I come
Right.
back to you on this fair housing issue?" And people need to be aware that for the federal law, and I know locally here in DC, you have 1 year to file a complaint. And so we encourage people to, of course, address that immediate need for housing, but please don't forget, to come back and deal with this discrimination, because you only have 1 year, 12 months to deal with it.
Interesting. Listen, we're going to take a break, but I want our listeners to remember you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com, our website. The original Quiet Storm is coming up next on WHUR-FM. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM, channel 141, 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation tonight about housing discrimination. My guests are Candace Gray, Director of Education and Outreach for the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, and Ronald Clarkson, Director of Communications and Outreach for Housing Counseling Services Incorporated. I want to talk more about this issue of discrimination again, more broadly from your perspective, Candace. What is the kind of housing complaint that your organization gets? Is it race? Is it gender? What would you say it is?
So we've been seeing a trending in complaints regarding race, source of income, and disability. So of course, race, one's background. Sometimes individuals may experience discrimination with national origin, which is also around the category of race. Sometimes individuals experience source of income discrimination, and it is illegal to discriminate individuals that receive any type of housing vouchers or help from the government, or any form of income. If someone is receiving child support and that's a form of income, a source of income, if any housing organization tries to discriminate an individual because of these types of sources of income, it is illegal. Some individuals may see a sign, or renters or owners of such as landlords, they may say like, hey, we don't accept that. That is illegal. We have had individuals that have been in situations where a landlord or renter has stated, we don't accept this source of income, and again, maybe the landlord doesn't know the law. However, that is illegal. The law is the law. So it is, we have seen that trend. And again, and also with disability, individuals not having accommodations or for any disability that they may have. And again, this isn't just a physical disability, it could be a mental disability as well. But right now, one of the top trending complaints is source of income.
Ron, you were nodding your head when she was speaking.
Yes, we see a mirror of that with a majority of our cases who will wind up in the District of Columbia. And I'll be letting Candace know that we may be sending a referral to you very soon. As one of my coworkers told me this morning about a housing provider in Maryland who is right now not willing to accept a voucher from one of the programs that we provide. And I told my colleague, well, I'm going to be talking to some folks from Maryland today. And so you might want to let that housing provider know that that we are going to do our best to make sure this person is fully able to use their rights and obtain housing with the use of a voucher, because that is sometimes what, as Candace said, is source of income refers to. And so we do see that quite a bit.
One of the other.
To add,
go ahead, please.
I apologize. I just wanted to add to that as well. Again, sometimes renters or landlords may say, hey, I'm not accepting that. But if the individual pulls up the law online, if they have their phone with them, they can show, hey, according to the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, or this is the law. It says that you have to accept this, that you not accepting this source of income is illegal. And I say that to say we've had conversations with individuals that have shown the law to landlords or renters, and then they see a change in the conversation, like, oh, well, okay, let's start over. That has been those situations have happened where it seems as if one is, renters or landlords are trying to get over, or they may not know, and they're just going off of what they've done over time. But when, again, referencing earlier, I mentioned ensuring that anything that you're involved in, do your research, because you can show and pull up the law and show a landlord or renter, and and when they are informed of the law, then the conversation does change.
And one of the things about the conversation changing, I mean, obviously we have the letter of the law, but you also have the spirit of the law, but you also have how that not just conversation but relationship between that renter and landlord may change, because I'm thinking, if I'm a landlord and I am now talking to an educated consumer, then that it appears to me that would bode well. Like you said, I could be breaking the law without malice. This is just the way I've been doing it, as you said, Candace. But if I have an educated consumer, somebody who comes to me and knows the law that would work in their favor, then one might safely assume that they also know the law as it would work in my favor. And as a result, I'm just spitballing here, but that is the kind of renter that I would want, because I would expect to have no chaos, foolishness, or shenanigans from that renter.
One could say that.
Yeah.
Like I said,
There are responsibilities on both sides,
Yeah.
and as you're saying, an educated renter or consumer would also hopefully respect their responsibilities to that property owner.
Yeah. One of the other things, just to delve into a little bit of the politics, as we know, this issue in Springfield where the unfounded conspiracy theories about some of the Haitian migrants that have come to that city in Springfield, and I've spoken about this earlier this week on this program. And for those who aren't familiar, Springfield is about the size of Bowie, Maryland, the city proper. It's about 58,000 people. Springfield is not large, but when you have rhetoric that is racially charged, and I'll ask you about this first, Ron. What impact do you believe that could have on housing status? Because you have a city that has an instant population growth, and we know that across this country there is definitely a housing shortage. But can't sometimes these racial comments impact how people are able to find housing?
As you're alluding to, absolutely, it can, because it sets the tone, the environment in which a person is searching for housing. And you will, I have a little bit of age on me, and I tend to think that there will always be some vestiges of bigotry and hatred out there. Hopefully, we can get to a point where there are none, but it's not going to go away in total. And so sometimes it will rear its ugly head when it feels it's safe to do so. And when that environment and culture around it is suddenly enraged about race and culture, then some people might feel safe in their racism, their bigotry. And so, yes, it makes it more difficult and challenging to do everything in life, and including finding housing. And so, all the more reason why people who seek housing need to be vigilant, need to educate themselves about the law, know their rights, know their resources. Organizations such as the Commission in Maryland and other places throughout the country that provide services to assist people to help get through those difficult challenges, so that they don't feel alone in combating things such as racism or bigotry, especially when it comes to a vital resource such as housing.
Yeah, your thoughts about that, Candace. I'm sure that your organization is acutely aware of the political climate that would affect housing.
Absolutely. And it's challenging because individuals in our community, in our nation, A lot of times go by he say, she say, as opposed to the law. And it is, in fact, illegal to say that a dwelling is not available or for sale or for rent, in an attempt to steer people away from this neighborhood or apartment complex based on any of the protected classes, including national origin and race. So even though these statements, are out and they are mentioned politically, sometimes people may believe them, but it in fact is illegal to discriminate or steer individuals away from living in a certain area or applying for a home in a certain area because of race and national origin, or their background. So it is so important for individuals to know the law. Um,
Yeah.
Again, even with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, outside of individuals being able to file a complaint, we have our education and outreach unit, and we provide trainings. We also every year have a fair housing forum in April to invite community members and individuals in our state of Maryland to learn and dive in so that they can know the law. It's so important. Knowledge is power, and I'll go into saying applied knowledge is power. You learn it and then apply it to your life. And even though we are the state of Maryland, the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, we serve the state of Maryland. When we provide our outreach opportunities, such as our fair housing forums, we do encourage individuals in DC, Maryland, Virginia to attend, so that they can see how we are presenting the information. And even though, again, we may be different entities, we can still collaborate and help one another. So it is extremely important that employees, employers, individuals, they seek out trainings and research so that they can know what the law is.
Let me ask you both this question. I'll start with you, Candace. Is housing in this country a human right? And if you believe that it is, what does that housing look like as a right?
That's a really great question. Housing is a right. It is vital. It's necessary. It's a necessity, in our nation and in our state. What that looks like, that's a great question, because what it looks like is not what it is right
Mm,
now. But that looks like equity and equality. It looks like organizations figuring out reasonable accommodations and being able to provide resources for all individuals in our state. Um, that is just so intricate. My mind is racing right now because I'm just thinking about all the resources that are provided, but then sometimes the systemic things that are in place that may hinder individuals from being provided with housing. But in a perfect world, everyone being able to apply for assistance or for there to be more housing options. Some individuals don't move to certain cities within our state because there aren't a lot of housing options. Where are those organizations, construction companies that are building housing? Where are the individuals that are going to be able to support this so that we can have housing for individuals? So again, in a perfect world, if everyone worked together to build housing, to provide more resources, and to educate everyone, as looking at housing as a human right, that would be the start of a great approach.
yeah, because Ron, and I'll add even a little more context to the same question. We hear in this country about the right to vote, but voting is also a privilege that can be lost.
Absolutely.
But and so sometimes I would imagine you can't always put the right to vote or the privilege of voting, which can be lost in the same category as housing. You know.
You're right. I'm gonna, at the risk of not being decisive here, I'm gonna try to put on two hats at the
Go
same
ahead.
time. One is my advocate hat, where I think when you first asked the question, my immediate thought ran to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and housing or shelter being among those needs. And But then on the other side, because we educate housing providers as well. So we
Hmm.
educate landlords and those folks, and I see it also from their perspective, in that a person might have a right to housing, but to what extent am I responsible for providing that?
That's a really
Okay.
great point.
Because some housing providers can legitimately say that they're doing their best, but this person is, for some reason, not holding up their end of the bargain. Maybe they're not paying their rent on time. And there may be some legitimate reasons behind that. But, the person who is a property owner still has bills to pay. Okay. So there are two sides to this, and I want to recognize that. And so, yes, my advocate side says yes, everybody has a right to housing. Okay,
Hmm.
that's my bread and butter. That's what puts food on my table, right? For me in the housing counseling services. But then there's the other side of it, recognizing that those folks who are living in that housing have a responsibility as well, not to abuse the housing, not to abuse that right, if it is a right. Some of us abuse rights as we go through life. And so we should make sure we don't abuse that right and take ill advantage of it. So it does bear a lot of thought, a lot of conversation, and it is a very interesting question that you pose.
We've been talking a lot about housing in the sense of renting, but certainly the the rental culture, landlord or renter, is not the only one. Obviously, discrimination takes place in home ownership as well. I wanted to speak more broadly for those who aren't familiar, and we've discussed this on this program in the past about the Johns Hopkins University history professor, a black man, and his wife, who sued Loan Depot for racial bias in home appraisal. They settled for an undisclosed amount this past spring. Unfortunately, uh, the wife died a week before the settlement. But the crux of this story has to do with whitewashing, where they were trying to take advantage of lower interest rates. They were seeking an appraisal. The first appraisal that they received was about $475,000, which in the community Homeland in Baltimore City, which is an older upper middle class community, they believed that their home was worth considerably more. What they did was they did the research, they did the experiment where they removed anything in their home that suggested that it was owned by African Americans. Then they got another appraisal that was $300,000 more. Um, it is unfortunate, but considering where we are in the world right now, Candace, what are your thoughts about whitewashing? It's 2024. Do we still have to do that to get fair treatment?
Yeah, that is that situation is extremely disheartening. To have to conceal who you are for to get a favorable, response. Again, I always, on behalf of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, revert to education.
Hmm.
Um, it is so important for us to connect and share about the educational opportunities and trainings not just for individuals that are applying, but for those individuals who are appraisers. And again, even with our Fair Housing Forum, we connect with those who appraise and lenders so that they are aware and connecting and collaborating with them so that rules and laws change. A lot of times things are not in place for individuals to not have to whitewash, or they are in place and individuals aren't being individuals, meaning those who are appraising and real estate agents. Laws need to be reinforced, because who's holding you accountable to ensure that you are following the laws, federal, state, and local? Who is going to ensure that we are reinforcing the law? So it's I think that it is vital to have these conversations with each other. We need to have conversations with appraisers and lenders and brokers, so that they are fully aware of the law. I know that with some organizations, it is a requirement to pass tests and ensure that you are every couple of years staying abreast on what the laws are. So I believe that, coming from a state agency point of view, it is imperative for us to continue to collaborate with these organizations so that we can reiterate and so that these individuals can be reinforced and be held accountable as they are holding other individuals accountable. So just the education is one of the most important approaches as well.
Yeah, and I needed to add before you respond, Ron, in the uh, case of the Johns Hopkins University professor, Professor John Connolly, uh, whitewashing didn't just mean he took everything out and got another appraisal where he and his wife were home. He had a white male professor friend of his stand in for that second appraisal. And we are talking about a community, again, homeland, which is a a grand but very, very diverse community. And it's a community of homeowners, and where every kind of person on the planet lives in this community, every kind of race, uh, gender, sexual orientation. It really is a cross section of the American human landscape. But again, it's unfortunate, Ron, that even in this happened in 2022. It was just resolved 2 years later, but it is an unfortunate reality of where we are when it comes to housing.
It is indeed. And unfortunately, that was not the only case.
Right.
There were cases nationwide from here to California where the exact same thing took place. And these professors, they were husband and wife, both were teaching at Johns Hopkins. They did their research and saw that previous instances had occurred in places like California, and they took lessons from that to try to improve their own situation. And so they were not alone in that fight. And the federal government did engage this issue at a very high level. The president established a task force called PAVE, and it was the president's task force on appraisal, valuation, and I believe equity. And that task force put together a set of proposals, some of which have been put into place, some have not, but it does try to take out some of that human aspect in the appraisal process so that there's a more systemic way in which it's done and the valuations are not kind of just pulled out of the air. And so that tries to get at some of the issues. And then they also go into the whole licensing of appraisers and trying to open it up in terms of who are the appraisers, and getting a more diverse appraisal pool, or appraiser pool, I should say, and trying to find ways. I know Maryland even is trying to find ways to diversify the people who do the appraisals, so that you have a broader population base to draw on there. And so it's being tackled from lots of different avenues, because as you highlighted some of the numbers there, those numbers represent not just dollars that were taken out of this household's bank account, but also it represents opportunity in terms of building Black wealth, because a lot of times people use the equity from their homes to
Mhm.
start businesses, to educate their children, things such as that pay it forward for our community. And if that's lost opportunity through reduced appraisals, well, that's a big hit to our community overall. And it's not just right now, but it's for years to come.
To Ron's point, Candace, in the case that I was just mentioning, the case in Baltimore, Professor Connolly and his wife, they had resources
Mhm.
to pursue, and they had information. Obviously, they were very well educated, but for those who do not necessarily have the resources, if they come to the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, how much teeth does the commission have in getting landlords or other entities that are discriminating to do what they're supposed to do?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question as well. So, with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, of course, we provide trainings and education to inform everyone of their rights. However, thankfully, we also have partners where we provide resources, we provide information for individuals to be able to connect with. And we also, regarding us collaborating with other entities within our state, we also meet with other commissioners and offices to then decipher, how these laws may need to be changed or how we can improve upon this. So any opportunities or any resources that we may not have, we do connect with our other offices, commissions, and other human rights agencies to put things in place, and to build a conversation around that. Because as we do know, we do see that there is discrimination happening. And again, if it is not under our jurisdiction, or if there is a resource that we don't have, we do collaborate with our commissioners and other agencies and entities to spark up a conversation to implement some type of change, whether that is changing the law, or sometimes the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, if we need to file a case against certain entities or businesses, then we have that right as well.
Does that include perhaps referrals to the Maryland Attorney General's office if these things, in your opinion, may reach to the point of criminality?
Yes, so we do meet with the Attorney General's office weekly, daily, and if
Hmm.
there is a topic that we deem, hey, we need to take this a little further, or this is not being addressed, then we do connect with offices such as the Attorney General's office to dive into this conversation to see what change can be made.
Mm.
So we're really grateful for those partners and these other state agencies, because we do collaborate, again, daily and weekly, to walk, to implement our mission.
I'm going to have that be the last word. Candace Gray with the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, and Ronald Clarkson with Housing Counseling Services Incorporated. As always, those websites will be posted on our website on WHUR.com this evening. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is the Daily Drum for this Friday, September 13th. For News Director Renee Nash, reporters Millette Green and Bramante Bryant, I'm Harold Fisher. Good night and have a